This week, we're diving into one of the most important and tricky questions in responsible AI. Are responsible AI principles culturally relative? If so, what does that mean for companies trying to implement responsible AI for their products? For example, if fairness means something different in Norway, the United States, or a Muslim country, how can companies possibly implement responsible AI in a way that works for everyone? To help unpack this, I'm joined by a PhD student who has published several papers on the practical challenges of implementing responsible AI.
Fairness perception is a very contextual, and it can be even different by the people in different countries. For instance, in a swimming pool, if you are using a face recognition AI
Yeah.
to recognize that if a man enters to the swimming pool, to the woman, swimming pool, so maybe in the Islamic countries, it makes sense. It's
Yeah.
not fairness issue. But if you implement it in a Western culture, Western mindset, it's not.
And please don't forget to hit the subscribe and like buttons. Your continued engagement is what makes this podcast possible. And we have a number of exciting episodes coming up that tackle topics such as AI ethics.
This is the OpenAI Changes Everything podcast with your host, Stephen Walther, where we explore how OpenAI is transforming the future of humanity.
Hey everyone, welcome to the show. I am so excited today. Today I have Pouria Akbari with me, and he is a PhD research fellow specializing in responsible data science at the Information Systems Department, University of Agder, Norway. He's also a visiting PhD researcher at the Center for Information Resilience, University of Queensland Business School. With a focus on bridging theory and practice, Pouria has contributed to advancing responsible AI by authoring and co-authoring several influential papers, including his recent work on operationalizing responsible AI principles through dynamic capabilities. His research explores practical strategies for implementing ethical AI in organizations, making his insights highly relevant to both academia and industry, and I'm assuming you. So let's go ahead. And I want to start just by thanking you for being on the episode today, by being on the show. Thank you for being here.
Hi, Stefan. Thank you for inviting me. Thanks for having me. Yeah, my name is Pouria. I'm doing my PhD, and if I want just a little bit about my background, in 2014, when I graduated from the master and start for looking for a job, at that time, data science and AI, especially machine learning, was a very hot topic, like responsible AI now. And I was eager to learn and start my position and my career in the data science field in the telecommunication industry. And then in 2000, I've worked with many different projects involved in a data science project. And until 2018, 19, I come across a paper from a Nature paper about moral machine learning, which is still is one of my favorite paper. And I understand that data science and machine learning field is not just always increasing the accuracy and reliability of the machine learning project, and they might have some social consequences as well. So I was interested to learn more about it and start to look for some PhD positions. And I start my PhD in this field, responsible AI, ethical AI, at University of Agder IS department. And now I'm working in this field.
That's really exciting. So it's interesting how one paper can make such a difference to your life. That must have been a good Nature paper, whatever was in it. What was the? I mean, was it like what made it so interesting for you? I mean, what was the part of it? Were you like concerned? Were you being driven by concern, or was it more like fascination? Or I guess I'm just curious about what was it about that paper that changed your career path?
Yeah, but in this paper, mostly discuss about the social consequence of the AI or machine learning, which was completely new for me at that time. At that time, mostly more focuses on just how to implement novel data science approaches and projects.
Yep.
And when I saw, okay, even the more advanced projects can have some consequences, and I was thinking, okay, and that cat could be one the next trend, the next future research trend. And now we can see that, especially after launching the generative AI like ChatGPT,
Mhm.
it's become more popular and become more concerned, even if the industry people, not just academic people, because this concept firstly discussed mostly by academic people in 2019-20.
Yeah,
But gradually now we can see the industry people also, they can see the point and the advantage of this concept.
that makes sense. And so, I mean, I came across you because I read a couple of your articles. And one of the things I was really impressed by the articles you wrote is you work, you did a lot of interviews with industry experts. You spent a lot of time, it looks like, creating surveys. I know in one article, in your operationalizing responsible AI article, I think you interviewed about 20 AI experts, including a bunch of C-level executives, managers, RAI researchers. And then I know for your other article, Responsible AI Principles, you had a survey where you went off and you surveyed, I think it was what, 80 experts. So I'm just curious about like, I mean, I want to dive into like your findings from this stuff, but just curious up front, was there something that came up in these conversations and surveys that was just really surprising to you that you didn't expect?
Yeah, I'm very happy that you found it very interesting and you read our works. And yeah, in these studies, what was we mostly focus was focusing on the experts which is already involved in responsible AI projects and already have a knowledge in this field. And I don't want to say the names because if I say names,
Right.
you will know them. And I mean, they're very knowledgeable persons in this field. And one of the interesting part, and maybe the discussion was, most of them said we need experts now. We experts which is already know both machine learning concepts in the technical sides and also the social consequences of implementing AI and responsible AI aspects. So we are lacking kind of peoples with these both knowledges, and that's actually make me curious to how we can help the organizations to bring these concepts as a resources and increase their capabilities and competences in their organizations.
Yeah,
Yeah.
one thing I really appreciate about your articles is a focus on operationalizing a lot of these AI principles. And because I've read so many articles now where they talk about sort of high level frameworks but they don't actually get to, the challenges having to do with in real organizations trying to take these principles and do something with it. So I love the fact that that there's such a focus on that problem. Um, and I guess I did want to ask a question about that. I mean, so just what's your advice for? Because I've been a product manager in a number of large organizations like Microsoft and Indeed, and I mean, we're not trained on responsible AI. We never got any specialized training, but I've worked on a number of AI projects in the past in these as a product manager. If you're a product manager, what's your suggestion for, because you just talked about there's kind of this gap in, sort of skill set that a lot of people working in organizations have. What's your recommendation if you're a product manager in one of these organizations and you're tackling a responsible AI project? Where would you start?
Thank you for your kind words. Just telling one recommendation to product manager, it's now is very hard, but we can say that nowadays our audience, our users, AI users, have a more deeper knowledge about the AI and the AI consequences. So, if we have a solution or product based on AI or machine learning, we should be more concerned about the consequences like privacy, security issues, or fairness issues which might happen to the people. And that's become more and more important than maybe 3-4 years ago. And one of the examples can be a Siri case in Netherlands, which is, I think, a very common and famous cases of scandal of AI, which is end up with the resign of the whole government in Netherlands.
Wait, I haven't heard
So
about this. What's the Siri case? I don't know anything
yeah,
about
the
it.
series case is a risk indicator system,
Uh,
and based on very complicated machine learning model, more than 300 variables, they predict a group of people have a high risk of fraud in asking some social benefits.
okay.
And at first, it started 2017, 16, 17, and they run this project for 2 years. And after 2 years, they found it many social consequences and many fairness issues, transparency issues, and whatever. So this shows that, and now people are more aware about this kind of issues.
Right. Well, as soon as I guess there's real harm, I guess it's not surprising. So this was a case where the government was using an AI system to try to identify people who are committing some sort of fraud against the government, and then I'm assuming some issues came up with the way they identified. I got it. Okay. Yeah. No, that
Yes.
makes complete sense. It sounds like,
Yes.
I know in the U.S. we've had like the Compass case where trying to figure out incarceration.
Yes.
That got a
Yes.
lot of people's attention. Case, I guess
Exactly.
that's how stuff like this works.
Yes.
Everything's fine until things blow up, and then people care about it. So
Yes.
uh, that
That
makes
that
it.
that that that's the thing, because I think nowadays there are many different discussions around these kind of scandals or
Yeah.
misuses anyway, and now people are be more aware about it. And
Uh,
also the media like you, I really appreciate that you're working and discussing on these topics, make it more visible to the world.
right. Yeah. Well, let's get concrete here. I know one of the things that you do in your article is you identify 10 responsible AI principles, including things like benevolence, privacy, explainability, inclusiveness. So I think I mentioned before, one of the challenges I've faced when trying to understand like responsible AI is it feels like everyone and their mother and their dog has released at this point a set of principles for AI. So there's a lot of them. I mean, Microsoft's released them, Salesforce released them, Google's released them. There's all the government regulation bodies. There's all the different there's a lot of them out there, and it's a little overwhelming. Do you think that there's a chance that they'll converge together at any point, or that we'll get sort of like a more manageable set of like AI principles?
Yeah, that's true. That's one of our main purpose of in this my PhD project, is how we can to make it a little bit simplify that kind of principles and make it easier for the organizations when they want to translate these high level principles to the code of conducts, like practices, not just takes codes. It's
Yeah.
just procedure codes, practices codes, and it's very hard, and it's a highly debate conversation around this. And based on our reviews, we have already more than 100 documents about this, and maybe we will have another more. But what we tried in our work
Yeah.
to bring a more applicable, first of all, theoretical view, help the organizations understand it, how they can transfer these principles in a more tangible way of resource management and strategic management of the process, and make it a little bit, reduce the complexity a little.
Nice. I'm glad to hear that.
Yes.
Well,
Thanks.
I know in your article you talk about two basic dimensions that you think about when you're categorizing these principles. Can you tell me a little more about that?
Yeah, the idea of these two dimensions was come from a very famous paper in the field by Barredo Arieta, and they propose two different type of AI principles for responsibility or explainability. They call it explainability. But the main idea was principles which is exactly related to AI, and principles which is related to AI and other process and practices in organizations. So these foundations help us to map different principles into these two dimensions. Yeah, just very briefly, and
No,
I can continue.
that's awesome. Okay, so AI specific principles, and then you have sort of end to end principles that have much more to do with sort of overall organizational practices. And it's just helpful to think about principles in that way. And then I think you did. I know from your survey that you sort of gathered together a bunch of themes that you saw when you asked all these experts. And I know you finally ended up with five themes, or I think you call them core capabilities that you think an organization needs to develop. Can we? Who are the winners? What was the top five themes that you found?
Yeah, yeah. The idea was using the strategic view of responsible AI and how organizations can manage and plan for the resources to achieve a responsible AI. And we defined, based on our interviews and analysis of our interviews, we found these five main themes, which was like, let me read, yeah, understandable AI models, for instance. Here, we need capabilities and competences in organizations to make understandable AI and reduce the complexity of the models. The next capability is bias remediations, and which is require kind of capabilities and resources and knowledge to evaluate the potential fairness issue in your proposed solution and your actions by AI. And responsiveness, it means putting the human in the loop and be accountable for the decision which is made by AI. Harmless means avoid some harms and risks like privacy and security risks. And common good means at the end of the day, we need a solution, we need an AI which bring benefits and make the life better for the humans. So these are the overall topic of five capabilities.
Awesome. Well, let's dive into a couple of them because I had some questions about it. Let's start with bias remediation. You said something that was very intriguing in the article. I think I'm going to quote back part of your article to you, but you said, interestingly, the way in which the interviewees used practices for evaluating fairness also differs from expert to expert and company to company. We've found that a common definition of fairness shared among all stakeholders is difficult to arrive at. So that my initial reaction was, that's kind of concerning that we're sort of like, arguing about basic, principles like fairness. And I was curious about that. Like, where does that come up when you're doing this kind of research, and why is it so difficult for people to align on one definition of fairness?
Yeah, fairness perception is a very contextual, and it can be even different by the people in different countries. For instance, in a swimming pool, if you are using a face recognition AI
Yeah.
to recognize that if a man enters to the swimming pool, to the woman, I mean swimming pool, so maybe in the Islamic countries, it makes sense. It's
Yeah.
not fairness issue. But if you implement it in a Western culture, Western mindset, it's not. It's not a fair. So this makes it, if you made a mistake
Yeah.
by this recognition, then it will be kind of fairness issue.
Right.
So it's very important how first we define what is unfair.
Right.
And even if we define it correctly, there might be some challenges in the practices. And someone argue that, no, this is not fair.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great example. Thanks for sharing that. I mean, it does make it kind of concerning though when governments are making these AI acts and they're trying to legislate, a lot of this stuff. If what I'm hearing, which, I think makes sense that depending on people's cultural background and all sorts of other things that they're going to be interpreting these things very differently. How is that? Doesn't that just give companies too much wiggle room, though, to say that, well, we're using this other notion of fairness or whatever? I mean, how do we actually hold like companies responsible for different things if there's no like agreed upon definition for something so basic as fairness?
Yeah, yeah. That's one of the challenges in using AI in that kind of challenging tasks. And when you make generalized decision making by AI for such a risky and challenging areas, you potentially increase the risk of that kind of arguments.
Yeah, that
That,
makes
that, that.
sense. And I guess I mean, I guess that's part of having a
Yes,
government and voters and all of that is to try to get all those voices and try to get input into trying to come up with some sort of well, it sounds like you're skeptical whether there can be one sort of like definition of fairness, that it's really just going to be very dependent on context and very dependent
exactly.
on and so that feels very challenging to me. It's disappointing. I hate to say it's not your fault, but it feels a little disappointing because I'd love, the simplicity of being able to say, no, no, you're violating this principle, you violated fairness. But it sounds like you're saying it's much more complicated than that.
Exactly. That's true.
All right. Well, let me ask you about the other one. The other principle that you spend time on is the common good capability. And first, let me ask you what is remind me what is this principle? What is the common good principle?
Yeah, common good principle main purpose is when we are starting to design and plan, provide any solution by AI, first think about how this solution can bring well-being and benefits to the people's lives and make the people's life easier. It's very simple.
Okay. Well, so I guess so. It's kind of like the do no evil, sort of like you start from actually, thinking you want to improve people's lives. I guess my question there is, again, I mean, I have a lot of respect actually for the leaders of the organizations I've worked in. I should just say up front that I've interacted, quite a bit with CEOs from some of the larger companies, and I've always been impressed by how concerned they are about social impact and ethics. And so I'm not one of those people who just think all corporations are evil empires off to, because I know, these people are trying to do the best they can. And so I know that a lot of the times, but at the same time, I know at the end of the day that for a company, a for-profit company, they have to account for their work to their stakeholders. I mean, they're supposed to be driving revenue. And so I guess my concern with this principle is, at the end of the day, they want to make money. And I could just see, well, we're doing this for the common good. And they're sort of like, well, I mean, that's not we're not a nonprofit here. Why should that be our main concern? And so I mean, I guess the question is, number one, should we be trying to convince companies that they should be focused more on the common good, or how do you convince a company that this is, something that's worthwhile for them to do?
Yeah, that's true. That's one of the challenges of responsible AI, how to make a balance between, because at the end of the day, organizations need to be alive and
Right.
earn money and make profit, of course.
Right.
But we should think in that way, as we are in an age that if we don't follow some basic principles, fundamental principles, and it causes serious consequences for our customers, these customers will not follow us and continue with us. So we cannot sell, we cannot get revenue from them.
So there's selfish reasons.
Yes.
There is a bottom line reason to be
Yeah.
concerned about your reputation and not, go
Yes,
off and do
exactly.
evil things. I guess
Yeah,
that's true. I mean, I'm
exactly.
thinking of like, Cambridge Analytica and, the horrible, horrible impact that had on Facebook and the whole history. I mean, that ruined APIs for everyone for a very long time. So I guess there's some good examples of that. I mean, you have an example in your article that I wanted to ask you about. You had an example of a children's publishing company. Can you say a little more about that?
Yeah, that's a example. Suppose you are using and giving the chance to your kids to use a generative AI to create some story for your kids, and your kids can read the story. So, of course, by doing this, the reading skills of your kid will be increased. But how you are sure that the content which you are presenting your kids are moral or safe, and who should check and control this? And this kind of a basic example of, okay, we have this, we have one advantages of it, but this also can have another side effect.
Yeah, I'm smiling because I'm thinking back to what you were saying about how culturally relative a lot of this stuff might be. And I just moved to Texas, the state of Texas, and Texas is very famous in the United States for being, super pro guns and very, very conservative. And I could see, a Texas version of a story being very different from, say, a Seattle version of the story where Seattle's
Mm,
considered much more liberal. And so I guess I worry about introducing this amount of, like, again, cultural relativism, or into these discussions, because at the end of the day, it seems it adds so much, sort of lack of accountability into the
mhm.
process, that I still kind of worry about. So I get your point, and I think it's a good point about using, common good. It's important for companies to worry about the common good for sort of defending their reputation and making sure, attracting good talent to the company and ensuring that customers don't ban them, and all the stuff that companies get in trouble for. So there's good selfish reasons to do it. But it also, I just worry about, you know, at the end of the day, I don't think companies should be making moral decisions. I don't think that's what they're there for. I think maybe governments should do it. People in academia like you might be, or, philosophers, ethicists, whatever, or, your priest or your cleric or
Exactly.
whatever. Those are the
Exactly.
people, the CEOs I've interacted with in major companies. They're not
Mhm.
qualified. I mean, they're very smart people, but they shouldn't be making decisions about morality. And so, again,
Mhm.
I guess I'm a little, puzzled about how we're going to enforce these responsible AI principles, without, and also give companies the latitude to make these decisions, and still, have the outcomes that we want.
Exactly, that's true. And you pointed at it correctly. Moral
Yeah.
is different between responsible AI. Morality is more individualistic, and it depends on your historical background and anything other things. So we are not expected from the CEOs in the market to have a moral decisions,
Right.
but at least did I think this responsible AI lens can help to achieve some of them.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, all right. Well, let me ask. So I know, we've talked about a little bit about product managers. Again, product manager most of my life. What do you recommend? Like, because I mean, right now it's really confusing in the United States. Trump was just elected. He just gutted a bunch of the Biden, responsible AI things related to regulations around responsible AI. It's hard as a product manager in the United States without a lot of resources to figure out, what they should be doing in this area. Do you have recommendations for, I mean,
Mhm.
how does someone learn more about this? How did one sort of like get buy-in from their company that they should be doing this, spending time on responsible AI instead of building products to make
Mhm.
money? How does what's your recommendation for, like, how a product manager should
Yeah,
approach this?
yeah. I think we should consider responsible AI is not like an obstacle of innovation of AI. It's a kind of enabler and help us to have a more sustainable businesses and more sustainable AI development. And that's the key, I think, term in making a balance between making the profit and having a sustainable development of AI.
So it sounds like you're saying it's a way product managers should be concerned about responsible AI up front, so they don't end up painting themselves into a corner later on where, all of a sudden they hit sort of a wall where they've discovered, hey, we've done things that is going to offend a huge amount of the population. It's going to have long-term consequences for the product. And so these are considerations we want to start, discussing with leadership from the very beginning so they understand where it's going.
Exactly. That's true.
Well, awesome. Hey, I super appreciate your time today. This was a really interesting discussion. Any closing thoughts on websites or books or articles? If people want to educate themselves more about this stuff, where should they go? What's the best way to learn more about responsible AI right now?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your invitation. But if I want to introduce some books and websites, firstly, I introduced the AI Analytics by MIT Press, Essential Knowledge Series by Mark Kokelberg, I think. Yeah, if I'm right, pronounce it correctly. And then Human Compatible, another book. You start with this MIT book and then Human Compatible. And if you want also interested to see some real examples of the AI incidents, there is a website, AI Incidents Database. If you just Google it, you can find.
Nice.
Maybe I
That sounds
shouldn't tell
fun.
the name, but this is a public website. And
That's
you can
awesome.
read different type of incidents of AIs, and you can see the
These are like
different
scary
type of-
stories for product managers website.
Yeah.
You go in and read about things have gone completely off the rails. That sounds inspirational. I like that. Well,
Yes.
awesome. Well, again, thank you for your time today. It was great meeting you.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for having me. That's my pleasure. And I'm very happy that you have this concern about responsibility in this area.
Thank you for joining us for the OpenAI Changes Everything podcast, where we explore how OpenAI is transforming the future of humanity. Please remember to subscribe to ensure that you receive future episodes.